welcome to the next installment of the Jiu-Jitsu Oracle's ADCC GOAT tier list, where Calum and I, Ross, are going through the process of finding out who is the greatest of all time in the ADCC. And along the way, we're going to recognise multiple competitors who've done great things and rank them on our tier list. So, Calum, can you run through the categories again on the tier list, please? And then in this episode, we're going to fill out our B tier.
Okay, so S tier, this is the top tier where we've got who we actually think is the GOAT of ADCC. We'll get into that in the next video. A tier is you're in the discussion for the GOAT, but we don't think that they qualify quite as the GOAT, but they're definitely in the discussion and worth talking about in that conversation. B tier is the strong champion tier, so this is guys that have won 2 or 3 times but aren't quite in that GOAT conversation for whatever reason, but nonetheless they've dominated their division or they've won multiple divisions. C tier is notable champions, so guys that have won once. If we were to put everyone that's won one ADCC title, there would be a lot of guys in that division, so we just picked out the biggest names. You can see guys like Damien Maya, Jacare, Mika, so some big names there that have won once. And then the D tier is guys that have never won an ADCC title, but are definitely legends of ADCC for whatever reason. In the case of Craig and Keenan and Nicky Rod both getting 2 silvers, or the case of Lachlan Giles having his crazy absolute performance. Those were the kind of guys that we had in D tier.
Okay, so the discussion on A tier, S tier, and ultimately the GOAT will be out before the end of the year. As this video goes live, I should be out of the country, so this one's going up when we're in a spell where we won't be recording any podcasts. And I believe the drought of elite level big shows will end sort of towards the end of November into December, and then that'll give us some stuff to chew over when I get back. But for now, let's continue our B tier. Those watching on YouTube will see 4 guys already there. So we have Cobrinha, Rafa Mendes, Braulio, Estima, and JT Torres. So we're going to add, for starters, Buchecha. So Calum, as you drag Buchecha into the B category, please explain why we're going to place him here.
Buchecha is an interesting one. If this was an IBJJF tier list, he would almost undoubtedly be an S tier. He's 10 times champion in IBJJF. If it was an overall jiu-jitsu GOAT tier, again, he might be a bit higher. Had a really good performances in ADCC, not quite up to par with his gi performances in IBJJF. Nonetheless, he was able to get double gold. I think the main thing for him was he was definitely expected, I would say, to win the absolute at one point or another. That was maybe the one thing in his career that was missing, that ADCC absolute title. Obviously he got close a couple times, with most notable being the recent time against Gordon Ryan, but nonetheless he was a 2-time champion, that being in 2013 where he beat guys like Cyborg, Dean Lister, Gary Tonin that year. And then it was a little while until his next one where he won again in 2017, where he beat Tim Sprigg, Cyborg again, Orlando Sanchez, and then he lost to Felipe Pena in the semi-finals for the absolute.
Yeah, and in 2013, he did very nearly double gold.
Yeah.
But he got beat in the final of the absolute division, right?
Came close a couple times, but I definitely think that was something that was maybe expected of him. It's a weird thing to hold against someone like doing that well, winning ADCC twice and then getting 2 silvers at the absolute, but I do think that was maybe the one thing missing from his career that was possibly expected of him, just given the caliber of grappler that he was and the success that he had in other organizations.
But champion in 2013 and 2017, so 2 golds to his name, and he goes into the B tier. Okay, let's go a 3-time champ. Foiler Gracie won in 99, 2000, and 2001, I believe.
Yep. So these kind of guys that were early 2000s, even 90s for some of them, we're not going to have the best knowledge of these guys as it was a bit before our time, but some notable wins on his resume for that were Barrett Yoshida, who you can see in our D tier, and he is potentially most famous for losing to Eddie Bravo. I think people know that a bit more about him than his actual championship wins, but nonetheless, he is a 3-time champion and was very dominant in that 66 kilo weight division around the time that he was champion, which was late 90s and early 2000s.
Yeah, I would say, looking at the names that Hoyler beat, probably Barrett would be the one that stands out to me. So I don't think he's necessarily got the strongest strength of schedule.
Yeah.
But 3 titles needs to be respected, and he certainly deserves a place in and among guys who've achieved multiple crowns. So we've got Hoyler Gracie there. Let's talk about a guy who we've seen much more of, Calum. Yuri Shimoish.
Yeah.
Yuri has 3 titles to his name as well. 2022, 2017, and 2015.
Yeah, he's got really good names on his resume. So in the finals of 2015, that's when he beat Keenan Cornelius. Obviously, he was in the super fight recently against Gordon Ryan that he lost. In 2017, he had a good run where he won his weight class, where he was able to beat Felipe Pena in the final. He was able to beat Nicholas Merigali in his absolute run prior to his match against Gordon Ryan. So he's got some really good names on his resume, I think. 3-time champion is obviously very strong, but when you look at his resume, it's a lot of referees' decisions, winning by 2 points, and I think that's the biggest critique of Yuri. When you look at his resume, obviously 3-time ADCC gold, he's done a bunch of other stuff as well, and nobody is that excited to watch him grapple for the most part, I would say. You compare that to someone like Craig, who hasn't won, and he's a massive name, everyone cares about him, everyone wants to watch him. So I think, obviously, Yuri's got the accolades, but that's potentially something lacking for him. Doesn't have that killer instinct or finishing ability or the most exciting matches. Would you think that was a fair comment to make?
Yeah, I think that's a fair comment, especially in the context of why might a 3-time champion who has names on his resume who are exceptional grapplers not be pushed up into A tier?
Yeah.
And I think, as you say, it's because a lot of the wins do come about by decision. Now, you could say that Yuri is exceptional at playing within the ADCC rule set, and that's fair comment. But then I would say, if he is that style of grappler, the way for him to push into our A tier would be to have 4 or 5 titles to his name. So, which could happen. Having lost the most recent super fight to Gordon, then next time around we might see Yuri do weight and absolute again, and he might win more titles. He's definitely tough to beat, but like just for pushing into that A category, probably looking for a bit more on the eye test and the submissions. So another guy we've seen a lot of recently, Calum, who's done well in the more recent ADCCs, Baby Shark. So 2-time champ, 2022 and 2024, and has some very strong names on his resume that he's beaten, which is something that we take into consideration.
Yeah, I think after 2019, there was definitely a big reshuffling of that 66 kilo division, where a lot of the guys from the past generation were retiring, and a lot of the up-and-coming guys like him, Fabricio, Pato, guys like that were really coming up, and he's definitely filled that void and cemented himself as the solid champion in that weight class. He's got a good strength of schedule just because it is a really tough division that he is competing in. So in both of his runs, he's got a win over Fabricio Andre. This time around, he then went on to beat Josh Cisneros and Pato in the final. And then back in 2022, had a really solid run as well. Ash Williams, Fabricio, like I said, Josh Cisneros again, and Gabriel Souza. So he's benefiting as far as strength of schedule, just how stacked his division is, but that's just further credit to him going back to back in such a tough weight class.
Yeah, definitely the man to beat at that weight class as well. Going into the next ADCC.
Yeah, I think like his first run, I don't think he had any subs, but I think it's different from Yuri. I think he's definitely a lot more exciting to watch than Yuri, despite the lack of subs. And then this time around, he did manage to get a sub in his opening match and in the final, of course, against Pato. But like I say, even with his last run, not getting any subs. Same thing with JT, a lot of no subs. But I think Baby Shark's a little bit different, especially in the eye test. As far as that, he is still very exciting to watch and enjoyable nonetheless.
Yeah, very well-rounded as well, so it doesn't really matter where the match takes place. Wrestling, Baby Shark on top, Baby Shark playing guard. He's got a great game and able to provide exciting action, whereas some of the guys on this list rely more on the wrestling or just top position. So that's another feather in Baby Shark's cap.
And I think it's fair to say it's unlikely he's ever going to win the absolute division, which obviously is going to make it harder for him to get into the upper echelons of the GOAT conversation. We know that's a bit easier for the guys that can win the absolutes. Nonetheless, he's so young and he's already a two-time champion. He can definitely be creeping into the GOAT conversation with guys that haven't won the absolute, like Marcelo, for example, just winning his division back to back to back. So definitely a lot of room for him to move up in this tier list.
All right. For the next one, let's just stick with someone who's competing more regularly recently that we saw the last ADCC. Let's go Felipe Pena, another champ from 2024. Really interesting when you look at his record that it was 2017 when he got his first gold medal at ADCC, and then now he's a two-time champ, having won in 2024.
Yeah.
Another one with strong names on his resume. Someone who very nearly beat who many consider to be the best grappler going right now, Gordon Ryan, in their super fight, the most recent ADCC. I just think it's testament to Felipe that he looked so good in 2017, and then I think he had a couple of, more difficult ADCCs, particularly 2022, but then now he's really bounced back and looked great at 2024, pushing Gordon all the way, and then winning a division that included Gordon's teammate in the final, Luke Griffith, who's been on the up recently, young contender, and for Felipe to get that win was super impressive.
Yeah, definitely. And then going back to 2017, that a lot of people would consider prime Felipe, he managed to win the absolute, of course, and then his semi-final match was his friend Buchecha, who he managed to beat, and then in the final was Gordon Ryan back then, who he managed to beat as well. So just those two matches in that absolute run are a very impressive strength of schedule.
Yeah, and I think he was close to double gold in 2017, nearly won his weight class as well.
Yeah, lost to Yuri in the final just by 2 points, but as we spoke about, Yuri's really good at just getting those the small things in the match to get the wins in with that 2 points. He also beat Lovato in the semi-final of that weight class as well.
And that would have been a much tougher style matchup for Felipe in 2017 with the wrestling, but I think you saw against Gordon that Felipe's wrestling's really come on.
Yeah.
And yeah, he initiated a wrestling exchange that Gordon ultimately came out on top of, but it was in the balance for a moment or two as Calum was having palpitations watching it.
Yeah. Before we move on to the next guy, I just want to address a comment from the last video. So if you can see where my cursor is, so about here going all the way back, these guys aren't going to be on the tier list. So if you were looking at guys like Nicky Ryan or Gio Martinez and thinking, well, if they've not been ranked already, are they going to be an A or S? No, this was a pre-made tier list that I've just added guys to. I don't know how to get rid of these guys, so don't be thinking that we're going to see like Roberto Jimenez in at A tier, obviously, because he's not one. So yeah, just to address that.
No, that's a fair comment, because I did think, and fire into the comments, please, if you're watching along, let us know if you think we're putting people in the right place. But I did see a comment about Nicky Ryan on the thread. I thought that's strange, because like we've not put him on our tier yet, and I can't see him going A or S. So why's that coming up? So yeah, good point, well made, Calum. Yeah. Okay, Janji Ribeiro. Can we talk about Janji? Who, like, to be fair, again, we've seen compete recently, but his peak was round about when he got his 2 titles, 2007, 2009. Another guy who has good names on his CV, and I think another guy who nearly double golded at one of those tournaments.
Yeah, he is one of the few guys I think that can rival Cyborg's longevity. So all the way back to 2003, didn't win that year, but got wins over Eric Paulson and Dean Lister, which are obviously 2 massive names, and then competed almost every ADCC since then. Like you say, managed to win in 2007, beating Robert Drysdale and Braulio Estima, so that is super impressive. And then flashing forward to, did you say it was 2011?
I think 2009.
2009. Yes, 2009, Andre Galval, Gunnar Nelson, Rico Rodriguez, so really impressive run there as well. And then all the way forward to years like 2017, he managed to get a win over Craig Jones. So taking a span of like 2003, beating guys like Dean Lister, all the way through to 2017, beating guys like Craig Jones, that is very impressive longevity. And then to get 2 gold medals along the way with that is super impressive.
Good. Let's go into a little section here where we're going to talk about some guys who, in ADCC terms, were a bit before our time. I'm older than Calum, believe it or not, but even when these guys were racking up their wins, I don't think I was doing jiu-jitsu yet. So first on that list is going to be Renzo Gracie, who has titles from 1998 and 2000. One of the biggest names in the sport, probably came across my radar first when he fought in Pride in MMA. But with 2 titles, he goes into the B tier.
Yeah.
Good. And again, when we're looking back in the history of that time, probably not the strongest strength of schedule in ADCC terms, but multiple champs, so definitely deserving of a place. If you want to enlighten us to any Renzo ADCC highlights, please let us know in the comments. Another guy around about that time, huge name in the sport. One of the first guys that was someone who I was interested in studying, and I knew that my coach was studying, was Saulo Ribeiro. Wins in 2000 and 2003, and I believe at least one of them came with a rather impressive standout victory.
Yeah, let me go just check that. So, win over Jeff Monson, which is impressive. I think the most impressive one in that is a 3-point victory over Jacare.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking of.
Yeah.
So, yeah, two big names to have on the list for Saulo. We have going, well, around about the same time as Renzo, 1998 champion. He did weight in absolute. We're talking about Mario Sperry. Don't know massive amounts about his victories in the ADCC, but I believe if we're playing by Gordon Ryan's logic, which is not something I usually try and do, Mario Sperry has 3 super fight wins as well. So he could be one of the most decorated guys in ADCC history if those titles are taken into account.
Yeah, one of the few guys to double gold, getting 2 golds on the same day as well, so that definitely puts him up there.
Yeah, but I think, and maybe our viewers and listeners can correct us if I'm not right on this, but I think with the ADCCs back in the day, there would be super fights made to take place that, were not necessarily defending absolute champion against the current super fight champion against the new absolute champion as it goes just now. And again, we saw another one of those super fights happen this time with Gordon against Felipe, but I would think that like a lot of Mario Sperry's super fight wins are those kind of matches that were just like added to shows. Okay, last one in this little section, Leo Vieira. 2003, 2005, two-time champ. And yeah, I would say like probably the name that stands out to me that he beat, who I rate, Rani Yaya. Managed to beat him twice, but I think lost a match to him as well later on.
Jeff Glover and a submission win over Ryan Hall, which is very impressive.
Yeah, he also beat Barrett Ishida, who we mentioned before, and he was the man.
Torres and Claudio Calasanz as well in the 77 when he moved up a weight class.
Okay, and then beat Eddie Bravo after Eddie's win against Hoyler. So good names there from Leo. But those guys, Henzo, Saulo, Sperry, and Leo Vieira, probably ahead of our time in terms of like watching intently through ADCCs. Seen clips, but if there's stuff that we should go back and watch, let us know. Right, let's shoot forward. Giancarlo Bedoni, two-time champ, in the same weight class, 88 kilograms, 2022, 2024. One of these guys that seems to peak for ADCC and look amazing when that competition comes around.
Yeah, I think last time around he had one of the best weight class runs of all time. I don't think there was too much hype for him going into that weight class. I don't think he was on a lot of people's radars to do super well, but he managed to get 3 out of 4 wins. He managed to beat Izaki Baenzi by points, submit the former champion Matthias Deniz, submit Owen O'Flanagan with a leg lock, given Owen's game, that's very impressive, and then get a rear naked choke victory over Hulk. So that is a super impressive run back from 2022. And then this time around, didn't look quite so dominant in his weight class. He had some tougher matches there, but still managed to go through some good names, beating J-Rod in the final, and then had not too bad of a run in the absolute as well, beating Davi Ramos and Wagner Pocha by submission, and then he lost to Cyborg.
Yeah. Let's talk about a guy who I think's massively underrated when it comes to these types of discussions. And I know this podcast, we're focusing entirely on the ADCC, but given that Fabricio Verdum has 2 ADCC titles to his name, 2007, 2009, is a multiple-time IBJJF GI world champion, and also a UFC world champion, I think his place among grappling greats is right near the top. But I think he often gets sort of forgotten about or overlooked when it comes to that kind of chat. And when it comes to ADCC, 2 titles, and I think he lost in a final in 2011 as well, so very nearly 3. So definitely deserves his place in the B tier for the ADCC GOAT list.
Yeah, definitely. If you're looking at just overall jiu-jitsu, you'd ideally like something that wasn't too specific to anything, so stuff that transfers from gi, no gi, and MMA, and he's obviously got all 3 of those checked off with all the accolades. I think we were saying before, he's the only guy coming from sport jiu-jitsu that actually won a world title to then go on and win UFC. Spoke about Damian Maia and Jacare on this list as well, but they weren't able to win the UFC title. Obviously, there's people with jiu-jitsu backgrounds that have won the UFC title, like Charles Oliveira, but I think, unless you're going to include BJ Penn, he might be the only guy that has won a UFC title coming from winning ADCC and IBJJF Worlds.
Yeah, that's the 3 that make it difficult for guys to do it. Because, yeah, like you said, BJ won GI Worlds, but didn't win ADCC. So, like, even winning GI Worlds and ADCC is really tough. So when you throw in, like, and then people say they're different sports, like, that's a different argument, right? But when you throw in what is definitely a different sport, UFC, then it makes it incredibly difficult to do. So, yeah, I think Verdum's super impressive. Right. Let's finish with 3 names. All interesting characters. Perhaps the most interesting, Jeff Monson. If you're not aware of Jeff Monson, then like just give him a quick Google and see who he is. In the ADCC, 2 titles to his name, 2005 and 1999, and I think he has some other medals there as well. I've seen bits and bobs of him competing. Not the most exciting competitor, relies heavily on his wrestling, but probably falls into that Yuishimo's category of being a real handful in the wrestling exchanges, being really tough to score on, and just being able to like grind out victories.
Yeah, I think he went into MMA after, and I will say visually he is like the archetypal stereotype of what everyone thought of an MMA fighter or cage fighter, as everyone say back in the mid-2000s. So that definitely adds to his character, as you were saying.
Yeah. Someone else with a great look, Mark Kerr.
Yeah.
I think did he win 2 titles in 2000, and he has a 1999 title to his name as well.
Yeah, he won the over 99 in 1999 and 2000, then he won the absolute in 2000 as well.
Yeah. Another guy in the Monson category of like heavy wrestling, not always the most exciting. I think like recent CJI was a bit of a throwback to like the ADCC of that era, when we had guys coming in from like a more wrestling background, right? Because like CGI, you had Kirkley and Downey, etc., taking part, and ADCC back in the day, you would have guys with a more wrestling background taking part. So Mark Kerr, yeah, real handful. And like, if you go back at that time, like I've seen more of his Vale Tudo fights than I have of his ADCC performances. With the strikes, the Vale Tudo was more exciting. But yeah, just be a nightmare matchup at that time to try and take him on and score against him, never mind beat him. And last of our B tier category, someone who was competing a wee while ago, but I think his legacy is felt quite strongly today. And that's Dean Lister. Won 2003, 2011, so that's pretty impressive that there was like a good chunk of time between them, and he managed to come back in 2011 and win. But like, when we talk about the leg lock game that exists now, a lot of the praise from people who have advanced the leg lock game goes back to Dean Lister and the game he was playing back in the day.
Yeah, definitely. I think that was a big competitive advantage for him in the early 2000s, where he got a lot of his success at ADCC, big pioneer of that game, and definitely someone that's had a big influence. So 2-time champion. If you look at guys on his resume that he's beat, Saulo Ribeiro, Jean-Jacques Machado, Rodolfo Vieira, so some really big names on that resume. Decent longevity as well, given the times that he went from winning his first title to his second, and then some good names on that resume too.
Okay, so that rounds out the B tier. As you'll see if you're watching on YouTube, C tier and D tier are also complete. And the last video in the Jiu-Jitsu Oracle's ADCC GOAT tier list will focus on A and S. If you want to give us any predictions as to who will make the cut, and remember, not every grappler that you can see on the screen right now will be moved up.
So it's from Hodger here to the guys on his left. So if you want to have a look at those guys and put your predictions in for where they're going to be, or out of those guys who you think is the GOAT, then leave a comment below.
Okay. Thanks. Like, subscribe, leave a comment. We'll be back soon.